So the last small subject for today is how did they care for these clothes? It really depends what kind of clothes and who cared for them. So if we look at the very elaborate formal clothes of the Victorians, especially evening dresses, they were very rarely washed. They were not really washable. They might be cleaned if they got stained. Maybe the hem of the skirt would be washed with a sponge. But if the dress was thoroughly soiled, then the process would be very difficult and time consuming. Because these dresses would normally belong to very rich ladies who would have their own ladies' maids, it would be the ladies' maids' job to take care of the dress. So such elaborate, expensive dress would have to be unstitched, so all the threads would have to be removed, so that the three-dimensional dress would be reduced to flat surfaces of the fabric, which would be put on a table and carefully cleaned with a sponge and soap. Then each part would be separately ironed, and only then the dress would be restitched together. So you can imagine this was a very elaborate and difficult process, and most ladies try to avoid that because the dress could get damaged easily, and generally this was something to avoid. That is why the Victorians, and generally people in the 19th century, before Victoria as well, wore quite a lot of underwear, and if only they could afford it, they changed the underwear regularly. They would change it every day or every other day at least. I mean the parts of the garderobe that were closest to the skin. So these things, as well as simple working day dresses or skirts or such garments, could be washed in water, and they were washed in water, and then they didn't have to be restitched basically. Of course, they did not have washing machines, and they did not have many of the things that we now take for granted, like washing powder. Here are a few objects that relate to washing clothes in the 19th century. First, of course, you wouldn't use the washing powder, you would make the soap solution. You would take a piece of soap and boil it in water until you had this kind of soapy water. Then very frequently, especially if you were washing white linen, so the regular standard material for underwear for both men and women, you would add a few drops of the laundry blue. This was a special dye that would prevent your white linen from getting yellow with use. It's still practiced. Many of today's washing powders have those little blue granules in them, and they serve the same purpose. In the Victorian period, before they invented the washing powder, you had to kind of mimic this process from scratch, so you could buy a little bottle of this blue dye and just pour a little bit, like a few drops, into your laundry to enhance the crisp whiteness of your linen. If you poured too much, you would end up with a blue laundry, and nobody wanted that. Generally, you would use a wash tub, either made of wood or sometimes tin. You would collect the clothes. Nobody had a washing day every day. You would collect the clothes and the bed linen and the table linen and the towels and everything else, and if you had a heap of clothes, if you had a heap of laundry, you would just do the laundry. If you could afford it, and this applies to the middle class as well as the richer sections of the society, you would hire somebody to help you or to do the laundry for you. There was a professional washerwoman who would visit the houses and help with the washing. This was very hard physical toil, and if you could only afford it, you would have somebody to help you. If not, you had to do it alone. So no hot water, usually no running water. Well, sometimes in the cities you might have the running water, but it would be cold anyway. So the washing was usually done in the kitchen, and it would start by boiling the water in a big pot. And you would pour the very hot water into the tub, add the soap and the blue, and throw in your laundry. Of course, you wouldn't like to touch hot water. It was very easy to burn your hands, and basically you had to be very careful not to spill this hot water. So you would either use the tongs to maneuver the linen in the wash, or you would use special inventions called a dolly or a posser. Here we have two examples. The first one is called a dolly because it looks like a little doll, perhaps, with two hands and some legs, more than two in this case. The idea was you kept it with your hands, so the horizontal part is for handling, and you actually move it in the tub full of hot water and the linen, so you make the linen kind of rotate in the water, like the modern washing machine basically, but you have to do it by hand. So the particles of dirt are washed away. Another option was a posser. The term comes from pushing, so a posser is something for pushing, and again it has a handle, and it's kind of this size probably. The bottom part is a kind of metal bell shape with holes in it, so you would push it up and down. The water would be sucked into this bell and then released, and the water would move with the soap, and then you could wash your linen. If your laundry was heavily dirty, you would have to use the washboard. So you would have to actually take the linen, probably when the water got a little bit cooler, so you wouldn't scald yourself, and you would actually push the linen against the washboard and mechanically remove the dirt. As you can see, time-consuming, dangerous, labor-intensive, something you wouldn't really like to do, and this was just the beginning, because then, depending on how much laundry you had and how much space you had in your yard or in your garden, you had to dry the laundry. Here we have typical Victorian wooden clothes pegs. They are also called dolly, like this wooden object for washing. You would just secure the linen on the rope and dry it, hoping for good weather. If the weather was not coming, you could use the indoors, but only if you had enough space indoors. So this was something of a problem. So then you would wait for at least a few hours for your laundry to dry. You might want to speed up this process by using a wringler or a mangle. These were contraptions. The most important part were these two wooden cylinders, and you would actually squeeze your laundry between those cylinders and turn the handle so that the water, much of the water, would be squeezed out of your laundry, so it would take a little shorter time to dry. After it was dried, you needed to iron it. So yes, absolutely, no electric irons. There were different types of irons. There was a basic type called a sad iron or a solid iron. It was just a piece of metal with a handle. You would heat it up against your cooking stove. You'd have to be very careful, because very easily you could overheat it and burn your linen or dirty your linen with the iron, and then, especially if you were a servant, you might get into very serious trouble. So it would be hot for just a moment, so you had to use this moment to iron the clothes. The newer inventions, because, well, the Victorians like to improve things, there are two kinds of irons here. One is a box iron with a removable metal piece called the slug. So you would heat this slug, so this metal insert, and when it was red hot, when it was really very hot, you would use the tongs to insert it into the box, hoping it would keep warm for longer and you could iron a bit more. Another possibility was another type of box iron, which would use red hot charcoals for the interior. So yeah, that was the way to do it before the invention of electricity. And of course, having clean, tidy, well-ironed clothes was a very important status symbol for the middle class, especially. So they would do it. They would do it. This was very important. Here we have two more objects, and one of them is a mystery object, so I will leave it for you to try and guess what it was used for. The first one, it looks like a kind of tongs, metal tongs, the one below this charcoal iron. It's also a kind of iron used for ironing pleats. So the folded, decorative folds on the material, very popular, for example, on the collars. For example, in the Romantic period, you will see very elaborate folded, pleated collars. Of course, they would be washed as anything, especially the elements of the garments that were positioned close to the body, and then they had to be ironed with such iron tongs. The mystery object is this size, so again it's kind of rather small utensil to be used at home. It consists of two parts. Here in the picture, the two parts are kept together. So one is a holder, so there is this leg and this part attached to the leg, which serves as a holder to the piece with a handle and the long, I think it's a kind of metal part with the end mimicking the shape of the holder. So it's like a little cylinder of metal again. What could this be used for? So this is the mystery object. I'm looking for your answers on the forum. And I will also give you the link to a very interesting and I would say entertaining episode from a reconstruction program for the BBC, kind of historical reconstruction called The Victorian Farm. And in one episode, the woman who, well, she's a historian and she's kind of specialist in historical reconstructions, and she played the part of a Victorian farmer, a farm woman, so she had to run the farm for herself and her colleagues, and one of the things she did was to have a proper Victorian laundry. So you can see the episode of Victorian Farm in which she does it. I think it's quite interesting. So that's it for this week, more or less. And next week we'll have the last part of the preliminary stuff, when we will talk about the levels of formality, so different types of clothes, not according to the style, but according to the occasion and time of day. Thank you for this.